You didn't choose your beliefs, you inherited them. Pause on that for a moment, because that single sentence, uncomfortable as it is, changes everything. This isn't an attack on believers. It's not an argument against faith, and it's not an attempt to tell you what you should believe. This is an examination of inheritance, of something most of us never realized we received, because it was handed to us before we could even speak. Think about it honestly. If you were born in Saudi Arabia, the odds say you'd believe one thing. Born in India, something entirely different. Born in Italy, Brazil, Pakistan, Thailand, each place quietly assigns you a worldview before you ever ask a question. Not because you researched it, not because you compared evidence, but because of geography. And that should bother you. Because if truth is universal, why is belief so local? Why does the ultimate truth change so perfectly with borders, cultures, and family lines? This is where many people instinctively pull back, not because the question is weak, but because it's strong. So let me be clear. Questioning how belief is acquired is not the same as attacking what is believed. You can respect faith and still examine its transmission. In fact, many religious scholars already have. Historians, theologians, even clergy have openly acknowledged something most followers never hear from the pulpit. That belief is overwhelmingly passed down, not discovered. That religion spreads through families far more effectively than through evidence. That faith is usually absorbed long before reason ever gets a seat at the table. This isn't a conspiracy. It's documented, studied, admitted. One prominent theologian once summarized it bluntly. We do not reason our way into belief. We are raised into it. And once you see that pattern, once you recognize that belief behaves more like an inheritance than a conclusion, a quiet tension begins to form because something strange becomes impossible to ignore. Truth shouldn't depend on your mother's womb or your passport. Yet belief does. And that doesn't mean belief is false, but it does mean something else is happening, something structural, something psychological, something very human, something that begins before choice, before consent, before doubt is even allowed to exist. Stay with me, because the mechanism that locks this inheritance in place is far more deliberate than you were ever told. And once you see how this inheritance was engineered, you can't unsee it. If belief were discovered through reason, the timing wouldn't matter. You could encounter it at 30 or 50 or 80. Truth doesn't expire, but that's not how belief is actually transmitted. Across religions, across cultures, across centuries, one instruction appears again and again, almost word for word. Teach them early, before doubt, before comparison, before questions take root. Religious texts openly say this, not subtly, not metaphorically, directly. Train a child in the way he should go. Teach them diligently from a young age. Impress these beliefs upon your children. The message is consistent. Belief must arrive before. Reasoning does. And religious scholars don't deny this. Many openly admit it. One theologian wrote that faith must be implanted early while the mind is still receptive. Another warned that exposure to questioning too soon could endanger belief. Think about that. Endanger belief. Now, compare this to how neutral truths are taught. No one says, don't question math until you're older. No one warns, protect children from science or they might lose physics. 2 + 2 does not fear curiosity. Gravity does not require obedience. Biology does not demand loyalty. They invite questions because questions strengthen them. Belief systems don't. And this is where developmental psychology matters. A child's brain is not a smaller adult brain. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for critical thinking, skepticism, and impulse control, is not fully developed until the mid-20s. Children are wired to trust authority. They must be. That's how survival works. When a trusted adult says, "This is true, this is right, this is dangerous to doubt," the child doesn't evaluate the claim, they absorb it. Psychologists call this authority bias. It's not a flaw, it's a feature. But when belief enters at this stage, it doesn't arrive as a hypothesis. It arrives as identity. Questioning it later doesn't feel like intellectual disagreement. It feels like betrayal, like fear, like loss. And religious educators know this. That's why belief is framed as moral duty before it's framed as truth. Why doubt is portrayed as weakness instead of curiosity. Why questions are delayed, redirected, or quietly discouraged. Which brings us to the contradiction no one wants to say out loud. If faith is truth, why must it be protected from questions until adulthood? Why does it need shelter during the very years when minds are most open, curious, and honest? Because once belief fuses with identity, it becomes self-defending. The question no longer feels neutral, it feels dangerous, and that is the moment many people experience their first quiet doubt, not about belief itself, but about how they were given it. No truth fears a child's question. Only fragile systems do, but childhood is only the beginning, because the real lock is installed later. And this is the point where the tone shifts, not because the subject becomes hostile, but because it becomes honest. And the next part is where most people stop listening, because it works too well. Across belief systems, one tool appears with remarkable consistency, not wisdom, not evidence, fear of punishment, fear of rejection, fear of consequences that don't end at death, but begin there. Hell, eternal suffering, everlasting separation, sometimes described in fire, sometimes in darkness, sometimes simply as loss, different imagery, same function, and religious texts don't hide this. They openly define fear as necessary. Fear is the beginning of wisdom. Fear the consequences. Those who disbelieve will face punishment without end. Fear isn't an accident of belief, it's a feature. Now pause and compare this to how real knowledge works. You don't accept gravity because you're afraid of what happens if you doubt it. You don't believe in disease because you fear eternal punishment for skepticism. You believe these things because the evidence holds, even when you want them to be false. Fear-based belief works differently. It doesn't ask, "Is this true?" It asks, "What happens if I'm wrong?" That single shift changes everything, because now belief isn't chosen, it's coerced. And this creates a moral injury most people never name. You are told you are free to choose, but warned that choosing incorrectly carries infinite consequences. That isn't free will, that's a double bind. Choose belief or face eternal loss. Question or risk punishment. Doubt or be labeled broken, sinful, dangerous, an all-loving system that relies on infinite punishment. Sit with that. Religious commentaries often justify this by saying fear is necessary for moral order, that humans need consequences, that love alone isn't enough. But that explanation collapses under scrutiny, because fear doesn't create understanding, it creates compliance. Historically, fear has always been the fastest way to enforce belief. Public punishments, exile, shunning, execution, not because truth demanded it, but because systems did. When belief is backed by terror, Disagreement stops being intellectual. It becomes existential. You don't just risk being wrong, you risk losing everything: your family, your community, your afterlife. And here's the quiet contradiction most believers feel but never say out loud. If a belief is true, why must disbelief be punished? If a system is loving, why does it require fear to maintain loyalty? If truth stands on its own, why threaten those who question it? This isn't about mocking faith. It's about recognizing a pattern. Fear doesn't teach, it conditions. It doesn't invite belief, it enforces it. And once fear is installed early, once it's tied not just to behavior, but to identity, it becomes self-sustaining. Even imagining doubt triggers anxiety. Even curiosity feels dangerous. Even silence feels like risk, which is exactly the point. But fear alone isn't enough, because fear can still be resisted. So the system added one final layer, something even stronger. It made doubt itself immoral. Doubt is not treated as curiosity. It's treated as failure, not intellectual failure, moral failure. Across belief systems, questioning is rarely framed as a neutral act. It's framed as weakness, as corruption, as something wrong with you. You didn't struggle because the idea was unclear. You struggled because your faith was weak. You didn't ask questions because the claim lacked evidence. You asked because something inside you was broken. This framing is not accidental. It creates a false choice. Either you believe or you are flawed. Either you submit or you are dangerous. Both can't be true at the same time. Because if questioning is immoral, then belief no longer needs to be explained. It only needs to be obeyed. Religious authorities have been explicit about this for centuries. Doubt is described as temptation, as spiritual disease, as the whisper of evil rather than the pursuit of understanding. Entire doctrines are built around this idea that faith is virtuous because it exists without evidence, that belief most pure when it resists reason. And here's the contradiction hiding in plain sight. A truth that demands obedience before understanding is not asking to be known. It's asking to be followed. Now compare this with how real knowledge behaves. In science, doubt is not a flaw, it's a requirement. Every claim is provisional. Every theory must survive questioning. Every idea is strengthened or destroyed by scrutiny. No scientist is told, stop questioning or you'll be punished. No researcher is warned, curiosity will corrupt your character. In fact, the opposite is true. The more a claim is questioned, the more confident we become in what survives. That's epistemology, the study of how we know what we know. And by that standard, systems that criminalize doubt reveal something profound. They are not optimized for truth. They're optimized for stability. History makes this unmistakable. Those who questioned doctrine were not debated. They were silenced, declared heretics, exiled, imprisoned, sometimes executed. Not because they were wrong, but because they were asking the wrong kind of questions. Religious rulings openly warned followers to avoid certain books, certain ideas, certain people, not because they were false, but because they were persuasive. Think about that. If truth stands on its own, why fear competing ideas? If belief is solid, why punish inquiry? This is where authority begins to collapse, because once questioning is labeled sinful, every answer becomes unquestionable by definition. Leaders don't need to explain, they only need to command. Texts don't need to justify themselves, they only need to be obeyed. And the believer is placed in an impossible position. To understand, you must doubt, but to doubt, you must sin. So you are told to obey first and understand later, which never actually comes. When questioning becomes sin, belief stops being faith and becomes obedience. This is the moment belief crosses a line from conviction to control. And once doubt was criminalized, the final layer could be added. This is the moment where everything locks into place. Because once doubt is framed as sin, the system no longer needs to answer questions at all. It becomes self-sealing. Here's how it works. If you believe, that belief is praised. It's called faith, strength, virtue. If you doubt, that doubt is condemned. It's called weakness, temptation, moral failure. Notice what just happened. Every possible outcome confirms the system. Belief proves the belief is good. Doubt proves you are the problem. There's no condition under which the belief itself can fail. This is the self-sealing belief loop. And once you see it, it's impossible to unsee. Ask for evidence, and you're told evidence isn't required. Ask for logic, and you're told logic is dangerous. Ask for consistency, and you're told mystery is divine. The claim is never evaluated. Only your loyalty is. At the center of this loop is a simple, circular assertion. It's true because it says it's true. The text is true because the text says it's true. The authority is valid because it claims authority. The doctrine is correct because questioning it proves corruption. Round and round it goes. No external verification allowed. No independent standard permitted. Philosophers have a name for this. Circular reasoning. It's not evidence. It's insulation. In philosophy of knowledge, a claim must be falsifiable. There must be some conceivable way it could be wrong. But self-sealing systems remove that possibility entirely. If evidence supports the belief, it's celebrated. If evidence contradicts the belief, it's dismissed. If logic challenges the belief, logic is redefined as arrogance. Nothing is allowed to touch the core. This structure isn't unique to religion. Psychologists and sociologists recognize it instantly. It appears in cults, in extremist ideologies, in authoritarian systems. Anywhere loyalty is valued above truth, the pattern is always the same. Outsiders disagree because they are blind. Insiders who doubt are weak. Leaders are right by definition. Leaving proves corruption. Even suffering is reinterpreted. If belief brings peace, it's proof. If belief brings pain, it's a test. If belief brings fear, it's humility. If belief brings confusion, it's your failure to trust. There is no losing condition for the belief, only for the believer. Direct religious claims reinforce this openly. Faith is praised precisely because it persists without evidence. Certainty is elevated above understanding. Submission is reframed as virtue, which leads to a devastating realization. The system doesn't want to be examined, it wants to be protected. Because examination introduces risk, and a belief that cannot survive risk is not a belief grounded in truth. It's a belief grounded in control. This is the point where many people feel a strange internal shift. Not anger, not rebellion, clarity. They realize they were never given a fair choice. They were taught what to believe, then punished for asking why. They were told doubt was dangerous, but never shown how truth could be harmed by questions. They were promised certainty, but only if they stopped thinking. This isn't liberation through knowledge, it's obedience through design. The system doesn't answer questions, it punishes them. And this is where most people realize something terrifying. The belief didn't trap them by accident, it trapped them by design. By this point, a question usually forms on its own. If this system is so carefully designed, Why does it look the same everywhere? Different names, different stories, different rituals, yet the same claims repeated with uncanny precision. Our way is the only path. This is the final revelation. Everyone else is mistaken. Listen closely. Every major religion insists it is unique, while using identical language to defend that uniqueness. Each claims exclusive access to truth. Each warns that outsiders are deceived. Each insists disagreement is an honest error, but blindness, rebellion, or corruption. They can't all be right. Their claims contradict each other directly, and yet they all protect themselves in the same way. That's the collapse. Because if one religion were uniquely true, you'd expect its structure to be different. You'd expect it to welcome comparison, to invite scrutiny, to stand apart in how it handles doubt. Instead, what you see is repetition, the same fear narratives, the same moral framing of belief, the same punishment for questioning, the same promise of certainty if obedience comes first. Now bring geography back into the picture. Most people don't choose the only true religion. They inherit the one nearest to them. A child born into one tradition grows up convinced all others are false. A child born somewhere else grows up equally convinced of the opposite. Same certainty, same confidence, same devotion, different conclusions. How does that happen? How can mutually exclusive truths all use the same defense mechanisms? The answer is uncomfortable because it has nothing to do with divinity. It has to do with design. When systems compete for loyalty, they converge on the same strategies. Exclusivity creates urgency. Finality prevents revision. Demonizing alternatives prevents comparison. These aren't marks of truth. They're marks of insulation. And this realization creates a strange shift in perspective. You stop asking, which one is right? And start asking, why do they all behave this way? Because patterns don't lie. Independent truths don't converge on identical psychological defenses. But human institutions do, especially when survival depends on retention. Once you see this, belief starts to lose its mystical glow. Not because the ideas vanish, but because the machinery becomes visible. The fear, the loyalty tests, the inherited certainty, the punishment for leaving. It stops looking divine. It starts looking engineered. Every religion says it's different until you compare how they protect themselves. And once you see this pattern, belief stops looking divine and starts looking engineered. This is usually the moment it hits, not as an argument, not as a conclusion, but as a feeling, a quiet weight in the chest, a sudden tightness you can't quite explain, because understanding comes with a cost. Fear of what happened if you're wrong, guilt for even allowing the thought to exist, isolation because no one warned you how lonely clarity can feel. If you're feeling that right now, there is nothing wrong with you. You weren't meant to arrive here easily. For many people, belief wasn't just an idea, it was safety, community, meaning, identity. So when the structure begins to crack, it can feel like losing the ground beneath your feet. That fear you feel, that's not proof you're doing something wrong. It's proof you were conditioned to feel it. You were taught explicitly or quietly that doubt is dangerous, that questioning makes you disloyal, that stepping back means stepping away from love, goodness, or purpose. So of course this hurts. Of course it's heavy. But here's what almost no one tells you. The discomfort you're feeling isn't loss. It's transition. You didn't lose faith. You gained agency. You didn't become weaker. You became honest. Honest enough to admit that inherited answers don't always survive examination. honest enough to say, I don't know, instead of pretending certainty you never chose. And that takes courage, real courage, because it's easier to stay inside a system that tells you who you are, what to think, and why you belong. It's harder to stand in uncertainty and say, I will decide for myself. That's not betrayal. That's adulthood. Doubt is not the opposite of belief. It's the beginning of ownership. And if you're afraid of being alone in this, you're not. Millions of people reach this same breaking point, quietly, privately, often in silence, not because they hate belief, but because they respect truth too much to fake certainty. Leaving a belief doesn't mean you were wrong. It means you were honest. Honest about what you were given. Honest about what no longer holds. Honest about your right to think. And here's the most important part. Nothing was taken from you. You didn't lose meaning. You didn't lose morality. You didn't lose depth. You gained something far more powerful. The ability to choose your understanding instead of inheriting it. And once that happens, there's no going back to sleep, only forward, with your eyes open. If you've made it this far, there's something important you need to hear. You're not broken. Nothing is wrong with you. You didn't fail a test. You didn't lose your way. You didn't become cold, arrogant, or empty. You did something most people are quietly discouraged from ever doing. You looked at what you were given and asked whether it still made sense. That takes strength. And despite how it may feel right now, you are not alone. There is a growing community of people who reached this point not through rebellion, but through honesty. People who didn't wake up wanting to reject belief, but couldn't ignore the questions anymore. People who chose understanding over comfort, curiosity over fear, ownership over inheritance. This isn't about replacing one identity with another. It's not about trading one dogma for a new one. It's about freeing yourself from the idea that thinking is dangerous. This was never about religion versus atheism, or belief versus disbelief. It was about permission. Permission to ask, permission to pause, permission to say, I need better reasons. The biggest scam wasn't belief. It was being told you weren't allowed to question it. Once you understand that, something changes. You stop seeing people as enemies. You stop needing to be right. You stop fearing uncertainty, because truth doesn't need protection from questions. Only illusions do. If this video made you think, if it unsettled something familiar, if it gave language to doubts you've carried quietly, stay. Subscribe. Join the people who chose understanding over inheritance, not because we have all the answers, but because we refuse to stop asking the questions. The most dangerous lie humanity ever believed was that questioning the truth was immoral.